Dan Astin-Gregory here on the streets of London, joined by hundreds of thousands of people, as you'll see behind me today, marching for various different reasons. But for me personally, this is all about government overreach, given what we've seen in the last 12 to 18 months. But the primary focus of this march is around medical freedom and making sure that the response to the virus does not erode people's personal choices, and the mandates don't threaten the various different sectors like the care homes and the healthcare system by forcing people out of jobs. So you'll see there's a lot of people here. It's a carnival atmosphere. Probably won't be able to hear me. Today, the development of this march is there's lots of placards, no vaccine passports, informed consent, issues surrounding the childhood vaccinations, all kinds of different placards here today. You can see that this movement is now growing, the number of people on the streets as always, but also now people are getting organised with their banners, their t-shirts, make sure the message is really clear. Right in front of me here you can see the Together Declaration, no vaccine passports. I've been speaking to the press just now here in the UK at Hyde Park about why I believe vaccine passports are one of the most illiberal initiatives that the government has put forward, really threaten the very fabric of society in terms of dividing people between their medical status, creating segregated society, limiting people's access based on their medical records, which should always be private and should always come down to personal choice with informed consent. But beyond that, we're going to see if they are implemented, which is it's a high probability given what we've seen around the world and the money invested, unless we resist like we are here today. We'll see the increasing wealth gap, the inequalities growing. We'll see the existing discriminatory aspects of society widening, and this is simply not acceptable. Every health crisis, always leaves the situation open for exploitation, and we've seen this is no different. We cannot allow this crisis to diminish our civil liberties, our rights, democracy, because these individual rights can coexist and as are important as our collective interests of society. So I'm joined today by hundreds of thousands of people in London marching through the streets. I'll be covering the protest throughout today, so please do share the links to Pandemic Podcast. You'll find me on Facebook Live, Dan Astin-Gregory. You'll find me on YouTube, Dan Astin-Gregory, and you'll find us on Twitter, J Gregory, where all the live broadcasts will be seen throughout today. Here on the footage. So I'm going to share a mixture of commentary as we go through today, as well as some interviews with the members of the public who are here today to find out why they're here, why they're taking a stand, and overall to share some of the footage of what you can see around you. So let's take a look. As always, you'll find that there's a wonderful atmosphere. Good to see you, brother. Yeah, good to see you. A beautiful atmosphere as always. I think for those of you who have never been to a protest before and you've been thinking about coming along to one of these marches, take comfort from the fact that we have real strength in numbers and solidarity here, and there's always a wonderful peaceful atmosphere. But the difficulty is the mainstream media, if there's any slight altercation or provocation that leads to any arrests, those are the things they focus on. Yet, 99.99% of the march is peaceful, joyful, loving, compassionate, wonderful, high-spirited people. So as you can see around it, really high vibe. There's music, there's drummers, people having a great time. But it's not just about having a great time. Well, although in many ways one of the highest forms of expression when it comes to freedom is living freely. And one of the best ways you can do that is to demonstrate the importance, the value of freedom through the power of protest. And I spoke last night on the Pandemic Podcast about why protesting is important. I asked the question, is there any point in protesting? Will it change anything? Well, the reality is protests alone rarely change things. That's the fact. But they are a part of change, whether it's political change or social change or any other form of change. Protesting has an important role to play because it brings people together, firstly, to make people realise that they're not alone, as you can see here. And when people realise they're not alone in thinking what they think, in their concerns, in their frustrations, then all of a sudden you realise there is a real problem here. And we've seen a crisis of legitimacy, really, over the course of the last 12 to 18 months, where any dissenting voice has been smeared or censored or deplatformed. I myself have had my channel taken down from YouTube. After 5 million views, we were taken down from YouTube by the powers of by the powers of big.
I'm sorry, mate.
Brazil. People from all countries with Brazil flags taken down from YouTube for essentially challenging what we see here. And if you look at the Pandemic Podcast, if you're new to the show, we've had over 300 episodes now. We've had medical experts, scientific experts, legal experts, psychologists, a whole range, social scientists, a whole range of experts, business leaders, as well as commentary on the scientific papers, the data, interpreting and analysing, and yet this information is getting suppressed by social media, it's getting censored, it's getting deplatformed. And this is typical within a situation like this where a resistance is formed. So it becomes very difficult to share the realities. But when you come to a protest like this, you realise that you're not alone, firstly. But secondly, looking around us now, looking at the support that we're getting from the passers-by as the march continues through the street of London, you can see again that this is a fantastic way to help other people realise that there is a movement, there are people who are gathering together to stand against these issues, and that they previously may have not been aware that there is a movement that they can participate in. So there's been people honking their horns, waving, cheering as we walk past. So it's a great way, protests are a great way to raise public awareness. But beyond that, even if the media don't give favourable coverage, you cannot ignore when you see hundreds of thousands of people in the streets, and you know that people are dissatisfied. And ultimately, political power is held in the votes, and it's the people that provide those votes. And when large proportions of society gather together to say enough is enough, then it sends a clear message to the politicians that their vote may be under threat, either this time or the next time. So having this level of support publicly for a movement like this sends a clear message to the decision makers of the country, the lawmakers, that the people are dissatisfied. And that really is how you create intimidation amongst the politicians, because they recognise that their position may be under threat. You'll see that on a local level when enough people raise the issues, that they write to their MP, they speak to their MP, they start to raise the concerns that they have. Then they can start to make the MPs realise that when the vote comes around, they may not have the support that they have. So a protest plays an important role in doing that, in helping people to realise, to support politicians, the public, that there's a real set of issues that need to be addressed. And then lastly, the final thing that's really important about a protest is that data and statistics have shown us, history has shown us, that when someone participates in a protest like this, they typically become more politically engaged over the course of their lifetime, which ultimately is good for the society, because there are many issues beyond the issues that we're here to talk about today. And the reality is people become serial protesters, ultimately, because they become campaigners for life to make the world a better place for the people on the planet. So when we look at individual issues that are being protested against today, whether that's vaccine passports or vaccine mandates, or the issues surrounding vaccines in school children, the prospect of future lockdowns, then you know.
Really thank you for all your videos. I really love watching them, and congratulations as well.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Thank you so much. Congratulations. Oh yes,
Thank you so much. don't know what I was saying. So, political engagement. Political engagement. Beyond what we're seeing here today, there are many issues in society. Why I take great inspiration from this is not only challenging the specific issues that people are speaking out about, but it's all about creating the conditions for longer term change. Because the reality is we do have short-term problems and urgent problems that do need addressing. We can see that, and more and more of that will unfold as we go into the winter. You can see on the podcast I've been speaking about that recently and how we prepare for winter. It's something that really is important that we address. But beyond winter, if you think about winter as a metaphor, the season of winter as a metaphor, what follows winter is spring. Now, you may think, what are you talking about? Of course spring follows winter. I'm speaking metaphorically, because in spring we plant the seeds for the harvest later down the track. And to me, the spring season, metaphorically, is where we plant the seeds of change. And when I see things like this, when I participate in these rallies, I see so many conscious people who demand a better world, not only for themselves, their communities, their society, and the country, and the world around them, but they demand a better future for their children and their children's children. And today marks the third week anniversary, the third birthday, the third week since my baby was born, my little baby Zach. I'm here for him. I'm here for him to ensure that my baby boy grows up with at least as many freedoms and rights as I grew up with, if not more. Because we live in a world now of abundant opportunity, and there's no reason why my boy, all of our children, should grow up in a world where those rights and freedoms are suppressed or curtailed. They should have greater opportunities, greater rights, not just in the United Kingdom, but around the world. And what this movement has inspired me to do is dedicate the rest of my life on this planet to enhancing the world for the people on the planet and ensuring that our fundamental liberties, our human rights, and democracy itself is upheld and protected, not just in the Western countries, the developed world, but around the world. Because we all deserve that chance. Humanity deserves those things. They're a human right that our forebears have fought long and hard for, but now they're under threat. So I could talk about the issues surrounding the virus, pandemic management all day long, and there's many. They're abundant. But fundamentally, I'm here for something bigger, and that is about the change that we can create in the world. And I know, speaking to lots of people here today, that that's the change they want to see too. They want to see a better world. They want to see their liberties, their rights, and democracy protected. Now, the critics will say, well, we've got a virus, we've got to protect each other, we've got to do these things. Yes, we have to look after each other. Yes, we do. Sound public health information is the starting point. People to understand what the risks are. But we cannot diminish individual rights and freedoms and separate them from the collective interests of society and the world we live in. The reality is, like night and day, both are incredibly important and they're part of the ecosystem that we live within. So individual rights, civil liberties, democracy coexist with the collective interests of our communities and our society. They're not separate. But you'll see the powers that be, the way they create division amongst people is by making people feel like if you're not acting in the collective interest, or if what you are doing is deemed not in the collective interest, then you are being selfish, or your individual rights are less important than the collective whole. They're equally important. Collective interests are as important as individual rights. And many people here today are very familiar with that challenge, recognizing that those individual rights and freedoms are under threat. But what's very interesting, again, by the people that I meet at these protests, is that of all the people I know, they tend to have a higher bias towards collective interests than most other people that are challenging what we're doing here today or critical of what we're doing here today. The majority of the people I speak to here today are the ones that do want to improve society, that do want to come together to make the world a better place. Yet that's not how this thing is portrayed in the media, is it? So it's really important that people understand what's happening here. So delighted to be here, part of the procession. Wonderful atmosphere. You can see my man AJ Roberts here behind me. AJ, do you want to say a few words?
Hey guys, hope you're well. Lovely day for it. We're here again, aren't we?
Yes, of course.
We're here again. But again, another great turnout. People here with the same message, the same goal. And we all want the same things. And it's the and get rid of these ideologies that we need some kind of digital passport to like live our lives, and the fact that we're seeing freedom slowly being drained from people under their noses, and they're not seeing it. So it's great to see numbers like this. Should enforce, really hammering home the message, which I hope people back at home kind of starting to see that happen in their own lives, can see what's going on here today and every other gathering that we have, to really have a home, guys. This is not okay.
AJ, you've got your own show, you've been broadcasting around some of these issues as well. But for those at home that aren't familiar with your work, tell us a little bit about your history. What were you doing before the pandemic?
Yeah, so I was in the British Army for 15 years, served on tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, Sierra Leone. So I've seen the best and the very worst in humanity. And what we're seeing right now on our own shores is some of the worst crimes against humanity. There isn't no ifs and buts about it, and it's absolutely happening. Those who have tuned in and seen the people I've had on, we're seeing it, hearing from the horse's mouths, doctors, scientists just like yourselves, who have all the evidence and have witnessed these terrible atrocities. So we're at a time now where everybody, no matter your medical status, needs to align together. Like now, not in the future, not later, now.
Yes.
Yeah, because later turns into never.
Indeed it does. Thank you, AJ. So, there's always a common misconception, as I said, about the people in the crowd. AJ is ex-services. I know there's at least 200 ex-service people here today who are standing up against these issues. It's really important to recognise that different aspects of society have been affected in different ways, on an individual level, sector-wise, and every one of us has a role to play to move forward. So let's check out what's happening around us. You can probably hear the drums just ahead. Let's see if we can get some footage of the drums. Always brings an entertaining vibe when you've got the drums blaring. Drums there. Can't quite get a sight of the musicians. Approaching Buckingham Palace Road here, walking past. So again, if you didn't hear that here, the choice is preserved, informed consent when it comes to vaccines. Not just this vaccine, any medical product. You know, we enter dangerous times where the government gets to determine what goes in our bodies. Today it might be a COVID vaccine, tomorrow it might be something else, and that's you know, it's important that we recognise once you give permission to the state to intervene in our lives in that kind of way. It's very difficult to unravel that. So that's a very common reason why people are here today. Hopefully be able to get some more interviews as we go along. I'm going to see if I can see the comments in the chat. I imagine the sound isn't particularly clear. I'm going to get my microphone out in a short while. Thanks for your comments. I'm just looking through the comments in the feed. Thank you so much for your encouragement, for supporting the show. If you're new to the Pandemic Podcast, we broadcast every day during the week, bring you interviews. If you haven't already subscribed, please join our mailing list at danastin-gregory.com/pandemic. You hear about our latest interviews, content, got some amazing interviews coming up over the next few months. lawyer, I've spoken to another barrister. Again, goes to show that there's a whole wealth of different people here, different professions, representing different segments of society and humanity. This is an important time in history. I asked the question on Friday, will you be able to say that you were there? And saying you're there is one thing, being here today, but it doesn't stop today. It only begins with every step forward that we take, and there's different ways that we can all get involved in creating a better world, challenging these different policies, so that ultimately we can not only navigate our way from the situation we found ourselves in, but into a new and better world. And again, I can see ahead of me a number of gentlemen berets, again, mentioning there's lots of people here, current active servicemen and women, really supporting here. I mean, last time I was here, this time last year, and I'll tell the story later on when I speak, I met a police officer who was involved in the arrest of one of our speakers, or one of the speakers at the event. But he shared his concerns. He said the week prior he was here as a civilian. Hey, nice to see you.
I'd see someone's good luck, great.
A police officer was here the prior week as a civilian, but the following week he was there involved in the arrest of one of the protesters. But he shared his concerns about what's going on in the world, and he made many predictions that have since gone on to be true. So there's people all across the world joining in the protest movement, but here we are in the UK, on the streets of London, in high spirits, standing up against this, what we see.
Yes, so we're here today to help try and reach out and say to everyone else that we need to listen, we need to ask questions. We're not radical as people make us out to be. We've got some very good questions and we want them answered. So it's pretty sensible. We've got lots of doctors here, we've got lots of lawyers here. The media will want to portray us as crazy people. They want to just figure our argument. We just want an open debate. And that's not happening.
What's your expertise?
Yeah, well, we consult in a lot of psychology and behavioural economics, and we're seeing a lot of propaganda. And once people see the propaganda, it's going to really change how they see what's going on.
Absolutely. What's really interesting, I've spoken to people here, like lots of these maintenance, there's lots of reasons why people are here, but when I ask them what led them to making the decision, they say, oh, often people say intuitively there was something that didn't feel right.
Exactly.
But once they found that point of intuition, they then go to look for reasons.
Yes.
And one of the reasons why we were struggling to find a way through them was the communication. So what can we do to better communicate the message?
Well, the first thing we need to do is we need to meet people where they are. We need to honour their experience, we need to listen. That's the first thing. Once we do that, what we can do is we can start to have some rational conversations. Because the other thing we really need to do is we need to meet people on the lower levels of all the knowledge that we've accumulated.
Yes, yes.
You know, it takes many years to accumulate the knowledge that we have, and you'll find that people have just finding out. So we want to be very gentle.
Yes.
We want to introduce them to concepts, very solid, medical-based, scientifically-based concepts to begin with.
Yes. And there's an abundance.
You know, absolutely, there's many here now. And what you'll find is people will make their own way.
Yes.
They make their own way into it. And it's really just, you know, it's real gentleness. We've got to find a common ground. Because all of us effectively in this country want the same thing. We want fairness, we want help for each other. So once we meet at that level, people really start to listen.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. It's great to meet you in person. Thank you for what you do.
Don't close the judge the gate. Are you people really going to sit by idly while the government
Trying to make my way to the
with an unlisted,
front of the march. I think I'm very much in the front now.
The Queen is at $1 billion and I can do it. Anybody interested?
You could see
What we're marching about.
yeah, good, thanks. I'm always to the back, I'm in the front today.
Don't take the vaccine. Vaccines are killing just wait here for the banner. Nobody died at home.
Yeah, definitely in the front, so you can see the procession of police behind the community officers.
Hospitals are killing people. All the government in the world are killing people.
So we get the footage of the march approaching. Absolutely, thank you.
They're multiplying with us all over the world. I can do anything I see. You are seeing the Great Awakening. There is no pandemic. Let me repeat. There is no pandemic. The real pandemic is vaccine. And the vaccines are part of a political agenda. The political agenda. And we also have freedom of mission right now. The pharmaceutical industry. We have freedom of mission. We have freedom of mission.
They'll come back because they'll be blaming the vaccine deaths on injuries.
We have freedom. So what's the solution then, please, Mr. Reich? What is the solution? We know all you've told us. We want a solution.
Sorry, I just come up to say thank you for everything you're doing.
I know you
Amazing.
really. What is the solution?
Brilliant. I
What
must tell
is
you a
the
proper
solution, Mr. Reich?
the one with Rainer Fully gave me a bit of hope. Baby all right?
Baby's good, yeah.
She's down at here today.
Yes, Anna Breeze.
Yeah.
I haven't seen her actually.
No, okay.
Anna DeBruce, yeah.
Sorry to be a
No worries.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks, brother. So you may have seen that, Mr. David Icke there on the here. One of the protesters was asking, what's the solution? Which is a big question. You know, what is the solution to the different problems we're facing? And that's a very, very big question. And in order for us to say what is the solution, we must first define the problem. I've spent my entire professional career since I left my corporate world behind, asking those questions with entrepreneurs. And in order to develop innovation or solutions to world problems, we need to first define what the problem is. So to ask what is the solution is a very big question, because first it begins with defining the problem. And there's a multitude of problems that we're facing. We're facing the health challenges in themselves. We're facing a human rights crisis. We're facing a crisis of liberty. We've seen the rise of authoritarianism. We've seen the suppression of science. We've seen the rise of the technocratic, expert-led version of democracy. Hidden as democracy. It's really a technocracy. We see censorship. We've seen a whole series of problems, and we've seen the results of the policies. We've seen education decimated, billions of days lost of education collectively around the world, record hospital waiting lists, national debts, record levels. There's plenty of problems. So when we ask what's the solution, there isn't a single solution to all of these problems. Or perhaps there is. When I'm asked what's the solution, I think there's multiple dimensions to that. You've got political solutions, you've got economic solutions, you've got healthcare solutions, education solutions. But I do believe there is a human solution. And it's probably the greatest problem that humanity has ever faced that's never cracked. I've read philosophy from thousands of years ago which point out the same problems that we're facing today, and it's the human condition. So when we want to find the solution, if we're talking about the solution, it comes to the human condition and whether we can evolve our consciousness to the level where the human condition does not cause the harms that it causes to ourselves and the planet. Really, the solution is to evolve and elevate our consciousness. And that's a big ask. And how do we do that? Well, people throughout the years, throughout the millennia, have tried to evolve our human psychology, our human condition, our spirituality, our consciousness. Ultimately, at the heart of all these problems is a lack of human consciousness, and we need to elevate. But what we see is people talk about revolution. But the problem with the revolution is it goes in cycles. And if you'll notice through history, the world does go in cycles. Economic cycles, political cycles, from left to right, or traditional views of the left and the right. But we always just end up swinging, we're running in a circle. The real secret is to break that trap. It's to get out of the circle, to break free of that, to transcend that, to elevate beyond that, to evolve. Not revolve, we need to evolve, to elevate our consciousness. So what's the solution? Well, those banging the drums behind me, the religious contingent here from the church, may say that that's one solution. For many, that might be the solution. But ultimately, there is something beyond ourselves. I'm not a religious person myself, I'm a spiritual person. I believe in the very fabric of life that all of us share, the human beings, the plants, the animals, even physical matter, just vibrating particles, energy that we all share, the spirit that is amongst all of us. How do we begin to vibrate that at a higher level? How do we begin to change our thinking so that we avoid the systemic corruption that we see and the pain that is caused from megalomaniac leaders who rise to power? And how do we break that human condition where, as people do become more influential and powerful, how their own psyche can be preserved so that they can stand true to their values? And how do we bring those human values of love, compassion and peace to the new world? How do we bring that great awakening? So there is a multitude of practical solutions to the challenges that we face and some of the political issues that have been raised here today. There's different ways that we can challenge and create new solutions around these things. But ultimately we have to look ahead. We have to look beyond the present moment and into the future and create a more compelling vision of the world that we want to create. And if we create that world out of the same fear that we've witnessed in the last 18 months, then we will just bring more of the same. If we bring it out the same mentality and thinking, we'll see more of the same. So really, when the question is asked, what's the solution? It's how do we elevate our human psyche? How do we evolve the human condition? How do we become more conscious in our being? These are big questions that many people have been exploring since the dawn of time. And people have answers. Ultimately, I believe it's tapping into our own heart, becoming our fullest versions of ourselves, self-actualizing, stepping into the fullest versions of ourselves, becoming congruent with that, and then creating a ripple effect around the world. Ultimately, it's about self-empowerment. And when we empower the self, we empower the collective. And as I said earlier on, the individual self is perfectly connected to the collective self. And getting spiritual, we're all one. We're all made of the same matter. So when we vibrate at a higher level, and we raise the vibration of the planet, that's that's when we can start to build better solutions. So there is no single solution, but perhaps there is. Hey, I must be.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Really kind of you. So I'm going to take a quick break now. I'm at the front of the march. The march is catching up with us now. I'm going to take some time to hydrate. I'll be back on all the same channels. Dan J. Gregory on Twitter, Dan Astin-Gregory, Dan Astin-Gregory on Facebook, Dan Astin-Gregory on YouTube. Please do share this content. It's going to take a short break, recharge my batteries, recharge the phone, and I'll be back very shortly. Thanks for tuning in, thanks for sharing. Peace and love to you. And if you haven't subscribed already, please just take a moment to go danjgregory.com/pandemic. That's danjgregory.com/pandemic. Join our mailing list, get up to date with our latest broadcasts. Got some amazing interviews coming up, but I'll be back soon. I'm going to go and catch up with a few people here, and then I'll be back live reporting on the rest of the session. Thanks very much.